Michael's oldest boy came running through the garden toward where the Don knelt, and the boy was enveloped by a yellow shield of blinding light. But the Don was not to be tricked. He was too old a hand. Death hid behind that flaming yellow shield, ready to pounce out on him, and the Don, with a wave of his hand, warned the boy away from his presence. Just in time. The sledgehammer blow inside his chest made him choke for air. The Don pitched forward into the earth. The boy raced away to call his father. Michael Corleone and some men at the mall gate ran to the garden and found the Don lying prone, clutching handfuls of earth. They lifted the Don up and carried him to the shade of his stone-flagged patio. Michael knelt beside his father, holding his hand, while the other men called for an ambulance and doctor. With a great effort, the Don opened his eyes to see his son once more. The massive heart attack had turned his ruddy face almost blue. He was in extremis. He smelled the garden. The yellow shield of light smote his eyes, and he whispered, "Life is so beautiful." He was spared the sight of his women's tears, dying before they came back from church, dying before the ambulance arrived, or the doctor. He died surrounded by men, holding the hand of the son he had most loved. The funeral was royal. The 5 families sent their Dons and caporegime, as did the Tessio and Clemenza families. Johnny Fontaine made the tabloid headlines by attending the funeral despite the advice of Michael not to appear. Fontaine gave a statement to the newspapers that Vito Corleone was his godfather and the finest man he had ever known, and that he was honored to be permitted to pay his last respects to such a man and didn't give a damn who knew it. The wake was held in the house of the mall, in the old-fashioned style. Amerigo Bonacera had never done finer work, had discharged all obligations by preparing his old friend and godfather as lovingly as a mother prepares a bride for her wedding. Everyone commented on how not even death itself had been able to erase the nobility and the dignity of the great Don's countenance, and such remarks made Amerigo Bonacera fill with knowing pride, a curious sense of power. Only he knew what a terrible massacre death had perpetrated on the Don's appearance. All the old friends and servitors came. Nazarene, his wife, his daughter, and her husband and their children. Lucy Mancini came with Freddie from Las Vegas. Tom Hagen and his wife and children. The Dons from San Francisco and Los Angeles, Boston and Cleveland. Rocco Lampone and Albert Neri were pallbearers with Clemenza and Tessio, and of course, the sons of the Don. The mall and all its houses were filled with floral wreaths. Outside the gates of the mall were the newspapermen and photographers in a small truck that was known to contain FBI men with their movie cameras recording this epic. Some newspapermen who tried to crash the funeral inside found that the gate and fence were manned with security guards who demanded identification and an invitation card, and though they were treated with the utmost courtesy, refreshments sent out to them, they were not permitted inside. They tried to speak with some of the people coming out, but were met with stony stares and not a syllable. Michael Corleone spent most of the day in the corner library room with Kay, Tom Hagen, and Freddie. People were ushered in to see him, to offer their condolences. Michael received them with all courtesy, even when some of them addressed him as Godfather or Don Michael, only Kay noticing his lips tighten with displeasure. Clemenza and Tessio came to join this inner circle, and Michael personally served them with a drink. There was some gossip of business. Michael informed them that the mall and all its houses were to be sold to a development and construction company at an enormous profit, still another proof of the great Don's genius. They all understood that now the whole empire would be in the West, that the Corleone family would liquidate its power in New York. Such action had been awaiting the retirement or death of the Don. It was nearly 10 years since there had been such a celebration of people in this house. Nearly 10 years since the wedding of Constanzia Corleone and Carlo Rizzi, so somebody said. Michael walked to the window that looked out on the garden. That long time ago he had sat in the garden with Kay, never dreaming that so curious a destiny was to be his. And his father, dying, had said, "Life is so beautiful." Michael could never remember his father ever having uttered a word about death, as if the Don respected death too much to philosophize about it. It was time for the cemetery. It was time to bury the great Don. Michael linked his arm with Kay's and went out into the garden to join the host of mourners. Behind him came the caporegime, followed by their soldiers, and then all the humble people the Godfather had blessed during his lifetime, the baker Nazarene, the widow Colombo and her sons, and all the countless others of his world he had ruled so firmly but justly. There were even some who had been his enemies, come to do him honor. Michael observed all this with a tight, polite smile. He was not impressed. Yet he thought, if I can die saying, life is so beautiful, then nothing else is important. If I can believe in myself that much, nothing else matters. He would follow his father. He would care for his children, his family, his world. But his children would grow in a different world. They would be doctors, artists, scientists, governors, presidents, anything at all. He would see to it that they joined the general family of humanity. But he, as a powerful and prudent parent, would most certainly keep a wary eye on that general family. On the morning after the funeral, all the most important officials of the Corleone family assembled on the Mall. Shortly before noon, they were admitted into the empty house of the Don. Michael Corleone received them. They almost filled the corner library room. There were the two Caporegime, Clemenza and Tessio, Rocco Lampone, with his reasonable, competent air, Carlo Rizzi, very quiet, very much knowing his place, Tom Hagen, forsaking his strictly legal role to rally around in this crisis, Albert Neri, trying to stay physically close to Michael, lighting his new Don cigarette, mixing his drink, all to show an unswerving loyalty, despite the recent disaster to the Corleone family. The death of the Don was a great misfortune for the family. Without him, it seemed that half their strength was gone, and almost all their bargaining power against the Barzini-Tattaglia alliance. Everyone in the room knew this, and they waited for what Michael would say. In their eyes, he was not yet the new Don. He had not earned the position or the title. If the Godfather had lived, he might have assured his son's succession. Now it was by no means certain. Michael waited until Neri had served drinks.
I just want to tell everybody here that I understand how they feel. I know you all respected my father. But now you have to worry about yourselves and your families. Some of you wonder how what happened is going to affect the planning we've done and the promises I made. Well, the answer to that is nothing. Everything goes on as before.
Clemenza shook his great, shaggy buffalo head. His hair was an iron gray, and his features, more deeply embedded in added layers of fat, were unpleasant.
The Barzinis and Tattaglias are gonna move in on us real hard, Mike. You gotta fight or have a sit-down with them.
Everyone in the room noticed that Clemenza had not used a formal form of address to Michael, much less the title of Don.
Let's wait and see what happens. Let them break the peace first.
Tessio spoke up in his soft voice.
They already have, Mike. They opened up 2 books in Brooklyn this morning. I got the word from the police captain who runs the protection list at the station house. In a month, I won't have a place to hang my hat in all Brooklyn.
Michael stared at him thoughtfully.
Have you done anything about it?
Tessio shook his small, ferret-like head.
No, I didn't want to give you any problems.
Good. Just sit tight. And I guess that's what I want to say to all of you. Just sit tight. Don't react to any provocation. Give me a few weeks to straighten things out, to see which way the wind is going to blow. Then I'll make the best deal I can for everybody here. Then we'll have a final meeting and make some final decisions.
He ignored their surprise, and Albert Neri started ushering them out.
Tom, stick around a few minutes.
Hagen went to the window that faced the mall. He waited until he saw the Caporegime and Carlo Rizzi and Rocco Lampone being shepherded through the guarded gate by Neri. Then he turned to Michael.
Have you got all the political connections wired into you?
Michael shook his head regretfully.
Not all. I needed about 4 more months. The Don and I were working on it. But I've got all the judges. We did that first. And some of the more important people in Congress. And the big party boys here in New York were no problem, of course. The Corleone family is a lot stronger than anybody thinks. But I hoped to make it foolproof.
He smiled at Hagen.
I guess you've figured everything out by now.
Hagen nodded.
It wasn't hard. Except why you wanted me out of the action. But I put on my Sicilian hat and I finally figured that too.
Michael laughed.
The old man said you would. But that's a luxury I can't afford anymore. I need you here. At least for the next few weeks. You better phone Vegas and talk to your wife. Just tell her a few weeks.
How do you think they'll come at you?
Michael sighed.
The Don instructed me, through somebody close. Barzini will set me up through somebody close that supposedly I won't suspect.
Hagen smiled at him.
Somebody like me.
Michael smiled back.
You're Irish. They won't trust you.
I'm German-American.
To them, that's Irish. They won't go to you, and they won't go to Neri because Neri was a cop. Plus, both of you are too close to me. They can't take that gamble. Roccolampone isn't close enough. No. It will be Clemenza, Tessio, or Calorizzi.
I'm betting it's Carlo.
We'll see. It won't be long.
It was the next morning while Hagen and Michael were having breakfast together. Michael took a phone call in the library, and when he came back to the kitchen, he said to Hagen,
It's all set up. I'm going to meet Barzini a week from now to make a new piece now that the Don is dead.
Michael laughed.
Who phoned you? Who made the contact?
They both knew that whoever in the Corleone family had made the contact had turned traitor. Michael gave Hagen a sad, regretful smile.
Tessio.
They ate the rest of their breakfast in silence. Over coffee, Hagen shook his head.
I could have sworn it would have been Carlo or maybe Clemenza. I never figured Tessio. He's the best of the lot.
He's the most intelligent. And he did what seems to him to be the smart thing. He sets me up for a hit by Barzini and inherits the Corleone family. He sticks with me, and he gets wiped out. He's figuring I can't win.
Hagen paused before he asked reluctantly,
How right is he figuring?
Michael shrugged.
It looks bad. But my father was the only one who understood that political connections and power are worth 10 regimes. I think I've got most of my father's political power in my hands now. But I'm the only one who really knows that.
He smiled at Hagen, a reassuring smile.
I'll make them call me Don. But I feel lousy about Tessio.
Have you agreed to the meeting with Barzini?
Yeah, a week from tonight, in Brooklyn, on Tessio's ground, where I'll be safe.
He laughed again.
Be careful before then.
For the first time, Michael was cold with Hagen.
I don't need a consigliere to give me that kind of advice.
During the week preceding the peace meeting between the Corleone and Barzini families, Michael showed Hagen just how careful he could be. He never set foot outside the mall and never received anyone without Neri beside him. There was only one annoying complication. Connie, and Carlo's oldest boy, was to receive his confirmation in the Catholic Church, and Kay asked Michael to be the godfather. Michael refused.
I don't often beg you, please do this just for me. Connie wants it so much, and so does Carlo. It's very important to them. Please, Michael.
She could see he was angry with her for insisting and expected him to refuse. So she was surprised when he nodded and said,
Okay, but I can't leave the mall. Tell them to arrange for the priest to confirm the kid here. I'll pay whatever it costs. If they run into trouble with the church people, Hagen will straighten it out.
And so, the day before the meeting with the Barzini family, Michael Corleone stood godfather to the son of Carlo and Connie Rizzi. He presented the boy with an extremely expensive wristwatch and gold band. There was a small party in Carlo's house, to which were invited the Capo Regime, Hagen, Lampone, and everyone who lived on the mall, including, of course, the Don's widow. Connie was so overcome with emotion that she hugged and kissed her brother and Kay all during the evening. And even Carlo Rizzi became sentimental, wringing Michael's hand and calling him godfather at every excuse, old country style. Michael himself had never been so affable, so outgoing. Connie whispered to Kay,
I think Carlo and Mike are going to be real friends now. Something like this always brings people together.
Kay squeezed her sister-in-law's arm. She said,
I'm so glad.
Book 8, Chapter 30. Albert Neri sat in his Bronx apartment and carefully brushed the blue serge of his old policeman's uniform. He unpinned the badge and set it on the table to be polished. The regulation holster and gun were draped over a chair. This old routine of detail made him happy in some strange way, one of the few times he'd felt happy since his wife had left him, nearly 2 years ago. He had married Rita when she was a high school kid, and he was a rookie policeman. She was shy, dark-haired, from a straight-laced Italian family who never let her stay out later than 10 o'clock at night. Neri was completely in love with her innocence, her virtue, as well as her dark prettiness. At first, Rita Neri was fascinated by her husband. He was immensely strong, and she could see people were afraid of him because of that strength and his unbending attitude toward what was right and wrong. He was rarely tactful, If he disagreed with a group's attitude or an individual's opinion, he kept his mouth shut or brutally spoke his contradiction. He never gave a polite agreement. He also had a true Sicilian temper, and his rages could be awesome. But he was never angry with his wife. Neri, in the space of 5 years, became one of the most feared policemen on the New York City force. Also, one of the most honest. But he had his own ways of enforcing the law. He hated punks, and when he saw a bunch of young rowdies making a disturbance on a street corner at night, disturbing passers-by, he took quick and decisive action. He employed a physical strength that was truly extraordinary, which he himself did not fully appreciate. One night, in Central Park West, he jumped out of the patrol car and lined up 6 punks in black silk jackets. His partner remained in the driver's seat, not wanting to get involved, knowing Neri. The 6 boys, all in their late teens, had been stopping people and asking them for cigarettes in a youthfully menacing way, but not doing anyone any real physical harm. They had also teased girls going by with a sexual gesture, more French than American. Neri lined them up against the stone wall that closed off Central Park from 8th Avenue. It was twilight, but Neri carried his favorite weapon, a huge flashlight. He never bothered drawing his gun. It was never necessary. His face, when he was angry, was so brutally menacing, combined with his uniform, that the usual punks were cowed. These were no exception. Neri asked the first youth in the black silk jacket, "What's your name?" The kid answered with an Irish name. Neri told him, "Get off the street. I see you again tonight, I'll crucify you." He motioned with his flashlight, and the youth walked quickly away. Neri followed the same procedure with the next 2 boys. He let them walk off. But the 4th boy gave an Italian name and smiled at Neri as if to claim some sort of kinship. Neri was unmistakably of Italian descent. Neri looked at this youth for a moment and asked superfluously, "You Italian?" The boy grinned confidently. Neri hit him a stunning blow on the forehead with his flashlight. The boy dropped to his knees. The skin and flesh of his forehead had cracked open and blood poured down his face. But it was strictly a flesh wound. Neri said to him harshly, "You son of a bitch, you're a disgrace to the Italians. You give us all a bad name. Get on your feet." He gave the youth a kick in the side. Not gentle, not too hard. "Get home and stay off the street. Don't ever let me catch you wearing that jacket again either. I'll send you to the hospital. Now get home. You're lucky I'm not your father." Neri didn't bother with the other 2 punks. He just booted their asses down the avenue, telling them he didn't want them on the street that night. In such encounters, all was done so quickly that there was no time for a crowd to gather or for someone to protest his actions. Neri would get into a patrol car and his partner would zoom it away. Of course, once in a while there would be a real hard case who wanted to fight and might even pull a knife. These were truly unfortunate people. Neri would, with awesome, quick ferocity, beat them bloody and throw them into the patrol car. They would be put under arrest and charged with assaulting an officer, but usually their case would have to wait until they were discharged from the hospital. Eventually, Neri was transferred to the beat that held the United Nations building area, mainly because he had not shown his precinct sergeant the proper respect. The United Nations people, with their diplomatic immunity, parked their limousines all over the streets without regard to the police regulations. Neri complained to the precinct and was told not to make waves, to just ignore it. But one night, there was a whole side street that was impassable because of these carelessly parked autos. It was after midnight, so Neri took his huge flashlight from the patrol car and went down the street, smashing windshields to smithereens. It was not easy, even for high-ranking diplomats, to get the windshields repaired in less than a few days. Protests poured into the police precinct station house, demanding protection against this vandalism. After a week of windshield smashing, the truth gradually hit somebody about what was actually happening, and Albert Neri was transferred to Harlem. One Sunday shortly afterward, Neri took his wife to visit his widowed sister in Brooklyn. Albert Neri had the fierce, protective affection for his sister common to all Sicilians, and he always visited her at least once every couple of months to make sure she was all right. She was much older than he was and had a son who was 20. This son, Thomas, without a father's hand, was giving trouble. He had gotten into a few minor scrapes, was running a little wild. Neri had once used his contacts on the police force to keep the youth from being charged with larceny. On that occasion, he had kept his anger in check, but had given his nephew warning. "Tommy, you make my sister cry over you, and I'll straighten you out myself." It was intended as a friendly, pally uncle warning, not really as a threat. But even though Tommy was the toughest kid in that tough Brooklyn neighborhood, He was afraid of his Uncle Al. On this particular visit, Tommy had come in very late Saturday night and was still sleeping in his room. His mother went to wake him, telling him to get dressed so that he could eat Sunday dinner with his uncle and aunt. The boy's voice came harshly through the partly open door. "I don't give a shit. Let me sleep." His mother came back out into the kitchen, smiling apologetically. So they had to eat their dinner without him. Neri asked his sister if Tommy was giving her any real trouble, and she shook her head. Neri and his wife were about to leave when Tommy finally got up. He barely grumbled a hello and went into the kitchen. Finally, he yelled into his mother, "Hey, Ma, how about cooking me something to eat?" But it was not a request. It was the spoiled complaint of an indulged child. His mother said shrilly, "Get up when it's dinner time and then you can eat. I'm not going to cook again for you." It was the sort of little ugly scene that was fairly commonplace, but Tommy, still a little irritable from his slumber, made a mistake. "Ah, fuck you and your nagging. I'll go out and eat." As soon as he said it, he regretted it. His Uncle Al was on him like a cat on a mouse, not so much for the insult to his sister this particular day, but because it was obvious that he often talked to his mother in such a fashion when they were alone. Tommy never dared say such a thing in front of her brother. This particular Sunday, he had just been careless, to his misfortune. Before the frightened eyes of the two women, Al Neri gave his nephew a merciless, careful, physical beating. At first, the youth made an attempt at self-defense, but soon gave that up and begged for mercy. Neri slapped his face until the lips were swollen and bloody. He rocked the kid's head back and slammed him against the wall. He punched him in the stomach, then got him prone on the floor and slapped his face into the carpet. He told the two women to wait and made Tommy go down the street and get into his car. There, he put the fear of God into him. "If my sister ever tells me you talk like that to her again, this beating will seem like kisses from abroad. I want to see you straighten out. Now go up the house and tell my wife I'm waiting for her." It was 2 months after this that Al Neri got back from a late shift on the force and found his wife had left him. She had packed all her clothes and gone back to her family. Her father told him that Rita was afraid of him, that she was afraid to live with him because of his temper. Al was stunned with disbelief. He had never struck his wife, never threatened her in any way, had never felt anything but affection for her. But he was so bewildered by her action that he decided to let a few days go by before he went over to her family's house to talk to her. It was unfortunate that the next night he ran into trouble on his shift. His car answered a call in Harlem, a report of a deadly assault. As usual, Neri jumped out of the patrol car while it was still rolling to a stop. It was after midnight, and he was carrying his huge flashlight. It was easy spotting the trouble. There was a crowd gathered outside a tenement doorway. One Negro woman said to Neri, "There's a man in there cutting a little girl." Neri went into the hallway. There was an open door at the far end with light streaming out, and he could hear moaning. Still handling the flashlight, he went down the hall and through the open doorway. He almost fell over two bodies stretched out on the floor. One was a Negro woman of about 25. The other was a Negro girl of no more than 12. Both were bloody from razor cuts on their faces and bodies. In the living room, Neri saw the man who was responsible. He knew him well. The man was Wax Baines, a notorious pimp, dope pusher, and strong-arm artist. His eyes were popping from drugs now. The bloody knife he held in his hand wavered. Neri had arrested him 2 weeks before for severely assaulting one of his whores in the street. Baines had told him, "Hey man, this none of your business." And Neri's partner had also said something about letting the niggers cut each other up if they wanted to, but Neri had hauled Baines into the station house. Baines was bailed out the very next day. Neri had never much liked Negroes, and working in Harlem had made him like them even less. They were all on drugs or booze while they let their women work or peddle ass. He didn't have any use for any of the bastards. So Baines' brazen breaking of the law infuriated him, and the sight of the little girl all cut up with a razor sickened him. Quite coolly, in his own mind, he decided not to bring Baines in. But witnesses were already crowding into the apartment behind him, some people who lived in the building and his partner from the patrol car. Neri ordered Baines, "Drop your knife. You're under arrest." Baines laughed. "Man, you gotta use your gun to arrest me." He held his knife up. "Or maybe you want this." Neri moved very quickly so his partner would not have time to draw a gun. The Negro stabbed with his knife, but Neri's extraordinary reflexes enabled him to catch the thrust with his left palm. With his right hand, he swung the flashlight in a short, vicious arc. The blow caught Baines on the side of the head and made his knees buckle comically, like a drunk's. The knife dropped from his hand. He was quite helpless. So Neri's second blow was inexcusable, as the police departmental hearing in his criminal trial later proved with the help of the testimony of witnesses and his fellow policemen. Neri brought the flashlight down on the top of Baines' skull in an incredibly powerful blow, which shattered the glass of the flashlight, the enamel shield, and the bulb itself, popping out and flying across the room. The heavy aluminum barrel of the flashlight tube bent, and only the batteries inside prevented it from doubling on itself. One awed onlooker, a Negro man who lived in the tenement and later testified against Neri, said, "Man, that's a hard-headed nigger." But Baines' head was not quite hard enough. The blow caved in his skull. He died 2 hours later in the Harlem hospital. Albert Neri was the only one surprised when he was brought up on departmental charges for using excessive force. He was suspended and criminal charges were brought against him. He was indicted for manslaughter, convicted, and sentenced to from 1 to 10 years in prison. By this time, he was so filled with a baffled rage and hatred of all society that he didn't give a damn. That they dared to judge him a criminal, that they dared to send him to prison for killing an animal like that pimp nigger, that they didn't give a damn for the woman and little girl who'd been carved up, disfigured for life, and still in the hospital. He did not fear prison, felt that because of his having been a policeman, and especially because of the nature of his offense, he would be well taken care of. Several of his buddy officers had already assured him they would speak to friends. Only his wife's father, a shrewd, old-style Italian who owned a fish market in the Bronx, realized that a man like Albert Neri had little chance of surviving a year in prison. One of his fellow inmates might kill him. If not, he was almost certain to kill one of them. Out of guilt that his daughter had deserted a fine husband for some womanly foolishness, Neri's father-in-law used his contacts with the Corleone family. He paid protection money to one of its representatives and supplied the Corleone family itself with the finest fish available as a gift. He petitioned for their intercession. The Corleone family knew about Albert Neri. He was something of a legend as a legitimately tough cop. He had made a certain reputation as a man not to be held lightly, as a man who could inspire fear out of his own person regardless of the uniform and the sanctioned gun he wore. The Corleone family was always interested in such men. The fact that he was a policeman did not mean too much. Many young men started down a false path to their true destiny. Time and fortune usually set them aright. It was Pete Clemenza, with his fine nose for good personnel, who brought the Neri affair to Tom Hagen's attention. Hagen studied the copy of the official police dossier and listened to Clemenza. He said,
"Maybe we have another Luca Brasi here."
Clemenza nodded his head vigorously, though he was very fat. His face had none of the usual stout man's benignity.
My thinking exactly. Mike should look into this himself.
And so it was that before Albert Neri was transferred from the temporary jail to what would have been his permanent residence upstate, he was informed that the judge had reconsidered his case on the basis of new information and affidavits submitted by high police officials. His sentence was suspended, and he was released. Albert Neri was no fool, and his father-in-law no shrinking violet. Neri learned what had happened and paid his debt to the father-in-law by agreeing to get a divorce from Rita. Then he made a trip out to Long Beach to thank his benefactor. Arrangements had been made beforehand, of course. Michael received him in his library. Neri stated his thanks in formal tones and was surprised and gratified by the warmth with which Michael received his thanks. Michael said,
Hell, I couldn't let them do that to a fellow Sicilian. They should have given you a goddamn medal. But those damn politicians don't give a shit about anything except pressure groups. Listen, I would never have stepped into the picture if I hadn't checked everything out and saw what a raw deal you got. One of my people talked to your sister, and she told us how you were always worried about her and her kid, how you straightened the kid out, kept him from going bad. Your father-in-law says you're the finest fellow in the world. That's rare.
Tactfully, Michael did not mention anything about Neri's wife having left him. They chatted for a while. Neri had always been a taciturn man, but he found himself opening up to Michael Corleone. Michael was only about 5 years his senior, but Neri spoke to him as if he were much older enough to be his father. Finally, Michael said,
"There's no sense getting you out of jail and then just leaving you high and dry. I can arrange some work for you. I have interests out in Las Vegas. With your experience, you could be a hotel security man. Or if there's some little business you'd like to go into, I can put a word in with the banks to advance you a loan for capital."
Neri was overcome with grateful embarrassment. He proudly refused, and then added,
"I have to stay under the jurisdiction of the court anyway with the suspended sentence."
"That's all crap detail. I can fix that. Forget about that supervision. And just so the banks won't get choosy, I have your yellow sheet pulled."
The yellow sheet was a police record of criminal offenses committed by any individual. It was usually submitted to a judge when he was considering what sentence to give a convicted criminal. Neri had been long enough on the police force to know that many hoodlums going up for sentencing had been treated leniently by the judge because a clean yellow sheet had been submitted by the bribed police records department. So he was not too surprised that Michael Corleone could do such a thing. He was, however, surprised that such trouble would be taken on his account.
"If I need help, I'll get in touch."
Good. Good.
Michael looked at his watch, and Neri took this for his dismissal. He rose to go. Again, he was surprised.
"Lunchtime. Hey, come out and eat with me and my family. My father said he'd like to meet you. We'll walk over to his house. My mother should have some fried peppers and eggs and sausages, real Sicilian style."
The afternoon was the most agreeable Albert Neri had spent since he was a small boy, since the days before his parents had died when he was only 15. Don Corleone was at his most amiable and was delighted when he discovered that Neri's parents had originally come from a small village only a few minutes from his own. The talk was good, the food was delicious, the wine robustly red. Neri was struck by the thought that he was finally with his own true people. He understood that he was only a casual guest, but he knew he could find a permanent place and be happy in such a world. Michael and the Don walked him out to his car. The Don shook his hand.
"You're a fine fellow. My son Michael here, I've been teaching him the olive oil business. I'm getting old. I want to retire. And he comes to me and he says he wants to interfere in your little affair. I tell him to just learn about the olive oil, but he won't leave me alone. He says, here is this fine fellow, a Sicilian, and they are doing this dirty trick to him. He kept on. He gave me no peace until I interested myself in it. I tell you this to tell you that he was right. Now that I met you, I'm glad we took the trouble. So if we can do anything further for you, just ask the favor. Understand? We're at your service."
Remembering the Don's kindness, Neri wished the great man was still alive to see the service that would be done this day. It took Neri less than 3 days to make up his mind. He understood he was being courted, but understood more, that the Corleone family approved that act of his which society condemned and had punished him for. The Corleone family valued him. Society did not. He understood that he would be happier in the world the Corleones had created than in the world outside, and he understood that the Corleone family was the more powerful within its narrower limits. He visited Michael again and put his cards on the table. He did not want to work in Vegas, but he would take a job with the family in New York. He made his loyalty clear. Michael was touched. Neri could see that. It was arranged. But Michael insisted that Neri take a vacation first, down in Miami at the family hotel there, all expenses paid and a month's salary in advance, so he could have the necessary cash to enjoy himself properly. That vacation was Neri's first taste of luxury. People at the hotel took special care of him, saying, "Ah, you're a friend of Michael Corleone." The word had been passed along. He was given one of the plush suites, not the grudging small room a poor relation might be fobbed off with. The man running the nightclub in the hotel fixed him up with some beautiful girls. When Neri got back to New York, he had a slightly different view on life in general. He was put in the Clemenza regime and tested carefully by that masterful personnel man. Certain precautions had to be taken. He had, after all, once been a policeman. But Neri's natural ferocity overcame whatever scruples he might have had at being on the other side of the fence. In less than a year, he had made his bones. He could never turn back. Clemenza sung his praises. Neri was a wonder, the new Luca Brasi. He would be better than Luca, Clemenza bragged. After all, Neri was his discovery. Physically, the man was a marvel, his reflexes and coordination such that he could have been another Joe DiMaggio. Clemenza also knew that Neri was not a man to be controlled by someone like himself. Neri was made directly responsible to Michael Corleone, with Tom Hagen as the necessary buffer. He was a special, and as such, commanded a high salary, but did not have his own living, a bookmaking or strong-arm operation. It was obvious that his respect for Michael Corleone was enormous, and one day Hagen said jokingly to Michael,
Well, now you've got your Luca.
Michael nodded. He had brought it off. Albert Neri was his man to the death, and of course it was a trick learned from the Don himself. While learning the business, undergoing the long days of tutelage by his father, Michael had one time asked, "How come you used a guy like Luca Brasi, an animal like that?" The Don had proceeded to instruct him.
There are men in this world who go about demanding to be killed. You must have noticed them. They quarrel in gambling games. They jump out of their automobiles in a rage if someone so much as scratches their fender. They humiliate and bully people whose capabilities they do not know. I have seen a man, a fool, deliberately infuriate a group of dangerous men, and he himself without any resources. These are people who wander through the world shouting, "Kill me! Kill me!" And there is always somebody ready to oblige them. We read about it in the newspapers every day. Such people, of course, do a great deal of harm to others also. Luca Brasi was such a man. But he was such an extraordinary man that for a long time nobody could kill him. Most of these people are of no concern to ourselves, but a Brasi is a powerful weapon to be used. The trick is that since he does not fear death, and indeed looks for it, then the trick is to make yourself the only person in the world that he truly desires not to kill him. He has only that one fear, not of death, but that you may be the one to kill him. He is yours then.
It was one of the most valuable lessons given by the Don before he died, and Michael had used it to make Neri his Luca Brasi. And now, finally, Albert Neri, alone in his Bronx apartment, was going to put on his police uniform again. He brushed it carefully. Polishing the holster would be next. And his policeman's cap, too. The visor had to be cleaned. The stout black shoes shined. Neri worked with a will. He had found his place in the world. Michael Corleone had placed his absolute trust in him. And today, he would not fail that trust. Chapter 31. On that same day, 2 limousines parked on the Long Beach Mall. One of the big cars waited to take Connie Corleone, her mother, her husband, and her 2 children to the airport. The Carlo Rizzi family was to take a vacation in Las Vegas in preparation for their permanent move to that city. Michael had given Carlo the order, over Connie's protests. Michael had not bothered to explain that he wanted everyone out of the mall before the Corleone-Barzini family's meeting. Indeed, the meeting itself was top secret. The only ones who knew about it were the capos of the family. The other limousine was for Kay and her children, who were being driven up to New Hampshire for a visit with her parents. Michael would have to stay in the mall. He had affairs too pressing to leave. The night before, Michael had also sent word to Carlo Rizzi that he would require his presence on the mall for a few days, that he could join his wife and children later that week. Connie had been furious. She had tried to get Michael on the phone, but he had gone into the city. Now her eyes were searching the mall for him, but he was closeted with Tom Hagen and not to be disturbed. Connie kissed Carlo goodbye when he put her in the limousine.
If you don't come out there in 2 days, I'll come back to get you.
He gave her a polite, husbandly smile of sexual complicity.
I'll be there.
She hung out the window.
What do you think Michael wants you for?
Her worried frown made her look old and unattractive. Carlo shrugged.
He's been promising me a big deal. Maybe that's what he wants to talk about. That's what he hinted, anyway.
Carlo did not know of the meeting scheduled with the Barzini family for that night.
Really, Carlo?
Carlo nodded at her reassuringly. The limousine moved off through the gates of the mall. It was only after the first limousine had left that Michael appeared to say goodbye to Kay and his own 2 children. Carlo also came over and wished Kay a good trip and a good vacation. Finally, the second limousine pulled away and went through the gate. Michael said,
I'm sorry I had to keep you here, Carlo. It won't be more than a couple of days.
I don't mind at all.
Good. Just stay by your phone and I'll call you when I'm ready for you. I have to get some other dope before, okay?
Sure, Mike, sure.
He went into his own house, made a phone call to the mistress he was discreetly keeping in Westbury, promising he would try to get to her late that night. Then he got set with a bottle of rye and waited. He waited a long time. Cars started coming through the gate shortly after noontime. He saw Clemenza get out of one, and then a little later, Tessio came out of another. Both of them were admitted to Michael's house by one of the bodyguards. Clemenza left after a few hours, but Tessio did not reappear. Carlo took a breath of fresh air around the mall. Not more than 10 minutes. He was familiar with all the guards who pulled duty on the mall, was even friendly with some of them. He thought he might gossip a bit to pass the time. But to his surprise, none of the guards today were men he knew. They were all strangers to him. Even more surprising, the man in charge at the gate was Rocco Lampone, and Carlo knew that Rocco was of too high a rank in the family to be pulling such menial duty unless something extraordinary was afoot. Rocco gave him a friendly smile and hello. Carlo was wary. Rocco said,
"Hey, I thought you were going on vacation with the Don."
Carlo shrugged.
Mike wanted me to stick around for a couple of days. He has something for me to do.
Yeah, me too. Then he tells me to keep a check on the gate. Well, what the hell? He's the boss.
His tone implied that Michael was not the man his father was. A bit derogatory. Carlo ignored the tone. He said,
Mike knows what he's doing.
Rocco accepted the rebuke in silence. Carlo said so long and walked back to the house. Something was up, but Rocco didn't know what it was. Michael stood in the window of his living room and watched Carlo strolling around the mall. Hagen brought him a drink, strong brandy. Michael sipped at it gratefully. Behind him, Hagen said gently,
Mike, you have to start moving. It's time.
Michael sighed.
I wish it weren't so soon. I wish the old man had lasted a little longer.
Nothing will go wrong. If I didn't tumble, then nobody did. You set it up real good.
Michael turned away from the window.
The old man planned a lot of it. I never realized how smart he was. But I guess you know.
Nobody like him. But this is beautiful. This is the best. So you can't be too bad either.
Let's see what happens. Are Tessio and Clemenza on the mall?
Hagen nodded. Michael finished the brandy in his glass.
Send Clemenza in to me. I'll instruct him personally. I don't want to see Tessio at all. Just tell him I'll be ready to go to the Barzini meeting with him in about a half hour. Clemenza's people will take care of him after that.
There's no way to let Tessio off the hook?
No way.
Upstate, in the city of Buffalo, a small pizza parlor on a side street was doing a rush trade. As the lunch hours passed, business finally slackened off, and the counterman took his round tin tray with its few leftover slices out of the window and put it on the shelf of the huge brick oven. He peeked into the oven at a pie baking there. The cheese had not yet started to bubble. When he turned back to the counter that enabled him to serve people in the street, there was a young, tough-looking man standing there. The man said,
Give me a slice.
The pizza counterman took his wooden shovel and scooped one of the cold slices into the oven to warm it up. The customer, instead of waiting outside, decided to come through the door and be served. The store was empty now. The counterman opened the oven and took out the hot slice and served it on a paper plate. But the customer, instead of giving the money for it, was staring at him intently.
I hear you got a great tattoo on your chest. I can see the top of it over your shirt. How about letting me see the rest of it?
The counterman froze. He seemed to be paralyzed.
Open your shirt.
Counterman shook his head. He said in heavily accented English,
I got no tattoo. That's the man who works at night.
The customer laughed. It was an unpleasant laugh, harsh, strained.
Come on, unbutton your shirt. Let me see.
The counterman started backing toward the rear of the store, aiming to edge around the huge oven. But the customer raised his hand above the counter. There was a gun in it. He fired. The bullet caught the counterman in the chest and hurled him against the oven. The customer fired into his body again, and the counterman slumped to the floor. The customer came around the serving shelf, reached down, and ripped the buttons off the shirt. The chest was covered with blood, but the tattoo was visible, the intertwined lovers and the knife transfixing them. The counterman raised one of his arms feebly, as if to protect himself.
Fabrizio, Michael Corleone sends you his regards.
He extended the gun so that it was only a few inches from the counterman's skull and pulled the trigger. Then he walked out of the store. At the curb, a car was waiting for him with its door open. He jumped in, and the car sped off. Rocco Lampone answered the phone installed on one of the iron pillars of the gate. He heard someone saying, "Your package is ready," and the click as the caller hung up. Rocco got into his car and drove out of the mall. He crossed the Jones Beach Causeway, the same causeway on which Sonny Corleone had been killed, and drove out to the railroad station of Wantagh. He parked his car there. Another car was waiting for him with 2 men in it. They drove to a motel 10 minutes farther out on Sunrise Highway and turned into its courtyard. Rocco Lampone, leaving his 2 men in the car, went to one of the little chalet-type bungalows. One kick sent its door flying off its hinges, and Rocco sprang into the room. Philip Tattaglia, 70 years old and naked as a baby, stood over a bed on which lay a young girl. Philip Tattaglia's thick head of hair was jet black, but the plumage of his crotch was steel gray. His body had the soft plumpness of a bird. Rocco pumped 4 bullets into him, all in the belly. Then he turned and ran back to the car. The 2 men dropped him off in the Wantagh station. He picked up his car and drove back to the mall. He went in to see Michael Corleone for a moment and then came out and took up his position at the gate. Albert Neri, alone in his apartment, finished getting his uniform ready. Slowly he put it on: trousers, shirt, tie, and jacket, holster, and gun belt. He had turned in his gun when he was suspended from the force, but through some administrative oversight they had not made him give up his shield. Clemenza had supplied him with a new .38 police special that could not be traced. Neri broke it down, oiled it, checked the hammer, put it together again, clicked the trigger. He loaded the cylinder and was set to go. He put the policeman's cap in a heavy paper bag, and then put a civilian overcoat on to cover his uniform. He checked his watch. 15 minutes before the car would be waiting for him downstairs. He spent the 15 minutes checking himself in the mirror. There was no question. He looked like a real cop. The car was waiting with 2 of Rocco Lampone's men in front. Neri got into the back seat. As the car started downtown, after they had left the neighborhood of his apartment, he shrugged off the civilian overcoat and left it on the floor of the car. He ripped open the paper bag and put the police officer's cap on his head. At 55th Street and 5th Avenue, the car pulled over to the curb and Neri got out. He started walking down the avenue. He had a queer feeling being back in uniform, patrolling the streets as he had done so many times. There were crowds of people. He walked downtown until he was in front of Rockefeller Center, across the way from St. Patrick's Cathedral. On his side of 5th Avenue, he spotted the limousine he was looking for. It was parked, nakedly alone, between a whole string of red no parking and no standing signs. Neri slowed his pace. He was too early. He stopped to write something in his summons book and then kept walking. He was abreast of the limousine. He tapped its fender with his nightstick. The driver looked up in surprise. Neri pointed to the no standing sign with his stick and motioned the driver to move his car. The driver turned his head away. Neri walked out into the street so that he was standing by the driver's open window. The driver was a tough-looking hood, just the kind he loved to break up. Neri said with deliberate insultingness,
Okay, wise guy. You want me to stick a summons up your ass, or do you want to get moving?
You better check with your precinct. Just give me the ticket if it'll make you feel happy.
Get the hell out of here, or I'll drag you out of that car and break your ass.
Driver made a $10 bill appear by some sort of magic, folded it into a little square using just one hand, and tried to shove it inside Neri's blouse. Neri moved back onto the sidewalk and crooked his finger at the driver. The driver came out of the car.
Let me see your license and registration.
He had been hoping to get the driver to go around the block, but there was no hope for that now. Out of the corner of his eye, Neri saw 3 short, heavy-set men coming down the steps of the Plaza building, coming down toward the street. It was Barzini himself and his 2 bodyguards, on their way to meet Michael Corleone. Even as he saw this, one of the bodyguards peeled off to come ahead and see what was wrong with Barzini's car. This man asked the driver,
What's up?
I'm getting a ticket, no sweat. This guy must be new in the precinct.
At that moment, Barzini came up with his other bodyguard.
What the hell is wrong now?
Neri finished writing in his summons book and gave the driver back his registration and license. Then he put his summons book back in his hip pocket and with a forward motion of his hand drew the .38 special. He put 3 bullets in Barzini's barrel chest before the other 3 men unfroze enough to dive for cover. By that time, Neri had darted into the crowd and around the corner where the car was waiting for him. The car sped up to 9th Avenue and turned downtown. Near Chelsea Park, Neri, who had discarded the cap and put on the overcoat and changed clothing, transferred to another car that was waiting for him. He had left the gun and the police uniform in the other car. It would be gotten rid of. An hour later, he was safely in the mall on Long Beach and talking to Michael Corleone. Tessio was waiting in the kitchen of the old Don's house and was sipping at a cup of coffee when Tom Hagen came for him.
Mike is ready for you now. You better make your call to Barzini and tell him to start on his way.
Tessio rose and went to the wall phone. He dialed Barzini's office in New York and said curtly,
"We're on our way to Brooklyn.
He hung up and smiled at Hagen.
I hope Mike can get us a good deal tonight."
I'm sure he will.
He escorted Tessio out of the kitchen and onto the mall. They walked toward Michael's house. At the door, they were stopped by one of the bodyguards.
The boss says he'll come in a separate car. He says for you two to go on ahead.
Tessio frowned and turned to Hagen.
Hell, you can't do that. That screws up all my arrangements.
At that moment, 3 more bodyguards materialized around them.
I can't go with you either, Tessio.
The ferret-faced capo regime understood everything in a flash of a second and accepted it. There was a moment of physical weakness, and then he recovered.
Tell Mike it was business. I always liked him.
Hagen nodded.
He understands that.
Tessio paused for a moment and then said softly,
"Tom, can you get me off the hook? For old time's sake."
Hagen shook his head.
I can't.
He watched Tessio being surrounded by bodyguards and led into a waiting car. He felt a little sick. Tessio had been the best soldier in the Corleone family. The old Don had relied on him more than any other man, with the exception of Luca Brasi. It was too bad that so intelligent a man had made such a fatal error in judgment so late in life. Carlo Rizzi, still waiting for his interview with Michael, became jittery with all the arrivals and departures. Obviously, something big was going on, and it looked as if he were going to be left out. Impatiently, he called Michael on the phone. One of the house bodyguards answered, went to get Michael, and came back with the message that Michael wanted him to sit tight, that he would get to him soon. Carlo called up his mistress again and told her he was sure he would be able to take her to a late supper and spend the night. Michael had said he would call him soon. Whatever he had planned couldn't take more than an hour or two. Then it would take him about 40 minutes to drive to Westbury. It could be done. He promised her he would do it and sweet-talked her into not being sore. When he hung up, he decided to get properly dressed so as to save time afterward. He had just slipped into a fresh shirt when there was a knock on the door. He reasoned quickly that Mike had tried to get him on the phone and had kept getting a busy signal, so had simply sent a messenger to call him. Carlo went to the door and opened it. He felt his whole body go weak with a terrible, sickening fear. Standing in the doorway was Michael Corleone. His face, the face of that death Carlo Rizzi saw often in his dreams. Behind Michael Corleone were Hagen and Rocco Lampone. They looked grave, like people who had come with the utmost reluctance to give a friend bad news. The 3 of them entered the house, and Carlo Rizzi led them into the living room. Recovered from his first shock, he thought that he had suffered an attack of nerves. Michael's words made him really sick, physically nauseous.
You have to answer for Santino.
Carlo didn't answer, pretended not to understand. Hagen and Lampone had split away to opposite walls of the room. He and Michael faced each other.
You fingered Sonny for the Barzini people. That little farce you played out with my sister? Did Barzini kid you that would fool a Corleone?
Carlo Rizzi spoke out of his terrible fear, without dignity, without any kind of pride.
I swear I'm innocent. I swear on the head of my children I'm innocent. Mike, don't do this to me, please. Mike, don't do this to me.
Barzini is dead. So is Philip Tattaglia. I want to square all the family accounts tonight. So don't tell me you're innocent. It would be better for you to admit what you did.
Hagen and Lampone stared at Michael with astonishment. They were thinking that Michael was not yet the man his father was. Why try to get this traitor to admit guilt? That guilt was already proven, as much as such a thing could be proven. The answer was obvious. Michael still was not that confident of his right, still feared being unjust, still worried about that fraction of an uncertainty that only a confession by Carlo Rizzi could erase. There was still no answer.
Don't be so frightened. Do you think I'd make my sister a widow? Do you think I'd make my nephews fatherless? After all, I'm godfather to one of your kids. No, your punishment will be that you won't be allowed any work with the family. I'm putting you on a plane to Vegas to join your wife and kids, and then I want you to stay there. I'll send Connie an allowance, that's all. But don't keep saying you're innocent. Don't insult my intelligence and make me angry. Well, who approached you, Tattaglia or Barzini?
Carlo Rizzi, in his anguished hope for life, in the sweet, flooding relief that he was not going to be killed, murmured,
Barzini.
Good. Good.
He beckoned with his right hand.
I want you to leave now. There's a car waiting to take you to the airport.
Carlo went out the door first, the other 3 men very close to him. It was night now. But the mall, as usual, was bright with floodlights. A car pulled up. Carlo saw it was his own car. He didn't recognize the driver. There was someone sitting in the back, but on the far side. Lamponi opened the front door and motioned to Carlo to get in.
I'll call your wife and tell her you're on your way down.
Carlo got into the car. His silk shirt was soaked with sweat. The car pulled away, moving swiftly toward the gate. Carlo started to turn his head to see if he knew the man sitting behind him. At that moment, Clemenza, as cunningly and daintily as a little girl slipping a ribbon over the head of a kitten, threw his garrote around Carlo Rizzi's neck. The smooth rope cut into the skin with Clemenza's powerful yanking throttle. Carlo Rizzi's body went leaping into the air like a fish on a line, but Clemenza held him fast, tightening the garrote until the body went slack. Suddenly, there was a foul odor in the air of the car. Carlo's body, sphincter released by approaching death, had voided itself. Clemenza kept the garrote tight for another few minutes to make sure, then released the rope and put it back in his pocket. He relaxed himself against the seat cushions as Carlo's body slumped against the door. After a few moments, Clemenza rolled the window down to let out the stink. The victory of the Corleone family was complete. During that same 24-hour period, Clemenza and Lamponi turned loose their regime and punished the infiltrators of the Corleone domains. Neri was sent to take command of the Tessio regime. Barzini bookmakers were put out of business. 2 of the highest-ranking Barzini enforcers were shot to death as they were peaceably picking their teeth over dinner in an Italian restaurant on Mulberry Street. A notorious fixer of trotting races was also killed as he returned home from a winning night at the track. 2 of the biggest Shylocks on the waterfront disappeared, to be found months later in the New Jersey swamps. With this one savage attack, Michael Corleone made his reputation and restored the Corleone family to its primary place in the New York families. He was respected not only for his tactical brilliance, but because some of the most important caporegimi in both the Barzini and Tattaglia families immediately went over to his side. It would have been a perfect triumph for Michael Corleone, except for an exhibition of hysteria by his sister Connie. Connie had flown home with her mother, the children left in Vegas. She had restrained her widow's grief until the limousine pulled into the mall. Then, before she could be restrained by her mother, she ran across the cobbled street to Michael Corleone's house. She burst through the door and found Michael and Kay in the living room. Kay started to go to her, to comfort her, and take her in her arms in a sisterly embrace, but stopped short when Connie started screaming at her brother, screaming curses and reproaches.
You lousy bastard! You killed my husband! You waited until our father died and nobody could stop you and you killed him! You killed him! You blamed him about Sonny. You always did. Everybody did. But you never thought about me. You never gave a damn about me. What am I going to do now? What am I going to do?
She was wailing. 2 of Michael's bodyguards had come up behind her and were waiting for orders from him, but he just stood there impassively and waited for his sister to finish. Kay said in a shocked voice,
Connie, you're upset. Don't say such things.
Connie had recovered from her hysteria. Her voice held a deadly venom.
Why do you think he was always so cold to me? Why do you think he kept Carlo here on the mall? All the time he knew he was going to kill my husband. But he didn't dare while my father was alive. My father would have stopped him. He knew that. He was just waiting. And then he stood godfather to our child, just to throw us off the track. The cold-hearted bastard! You think you know your husband? Do you know how many men he had killed with my Carlo? Just read the papers. Barzini and Tattaglia and the others. My brother had them killed.
She had worked herself into hysteria again. She tried to spit in Michael's face, but she had no saliva.
Get her home and get her a doctor.
The 2 guards immediately grabbed Connie's arms and pulled her out of the house. Kay was still shocked, still horrified.
What made her say all those things, Michael? What makes her believe that?
Michael shrugged.
She's hysterical.
Kay looked into his eyes.
Michael, it's not true. Please say it's not true.
Michael shook his head wearily.
Of course it's not. Just believe me. This one time, I'm letting you ask about my affairs, and I'm giving you an answer. It is not true.
He had never been more convincing. He looked directly into her eyes. He was using all the mutual trust they had built up in their married life to make her believe him, and she could not doubt any longer. She smiled at him ruefully and came into his arms for a kiss.
We both need a drink.
She went into the kitchen for ice, and while there heard the front door open. She went out of the kitchen and saw Clemenza, Neri, and Rocco Lamponi come in with the bodyguards. Michael had his back to her, but she moved so that she could see him in profile. At that moment, Clemenza addressed her husband, greeting him formally.
Don Michael.
Kay could see how Michael stood to receive their homage. He reminded her of statues in Rome, statues of those Roman emperors of antiquity, who, by divine right, held the power of life and death over their fellow men. One hand was on his hip. The profile of his face showed a cold, proud power. His body was carelessly, arrogantly at ease, weight resting on one foot slightly behind the other. The capo regime stood before him. In that moment, Kay knew that everything Connie had accused Michael of was true. She went back into the kitchen and wept. Book 9, Chapter 32. The bloody victory of the Corleone family was not complete until a year of delicate political maneuvering established Michael Corleone as the most powerful family chief in the United States. For 12 months, Michael divided his time equally between his headquarters at the Long Beach Mall and his new home in Las Vegas. But at the end of that year, he decided to close out the New York operation and sell the houses and the mall property. For that purpose, he brought his whole family east on a last visit. They would stay a month, wind up business. Kay would do the personal family packing and shipping of household goods. There were a million other minor details. Now, the Corleone family was unchallengeable, and Clemenza had his own family. Rocco Lampone was the Corleone capo regime. In Nevada, Albert Neri was head of all security for the family-controlled hotels. Hagen, too, was part of Michael's Western family. Time helped heal the old wounds. Connie Corleone was reconciled to her brother Michael. Indeed, not more than a week after her terrible accusations, she apologized to Michael for what she had said, and assured Kay that there had been no truth in her words, that it had only been a young widow's hysteria. Connie Corleone easily found a new husband. In fact, she did not wait the year of respect before filling her bed again with a fine young fellow who had come to work for the Corleone family as a male secretary, a boy from a reliable Italian family, but graduated from the top business college in America. Naturally, his marriage to the sister of the Don made his future assured. Kay Adams Corleone had delighted her in-laws by taking instruction in the Catholic religion and joining that faith. Her two boys were also, naturally, being brought up in that church, as was required. Michael himself had not been too pleased by this development. He would have preferred the children to be Protestant. It was more American. To her surprise, Kay came to love living in Nevada. She loved the scenery, the hills and canyons of garishly red rock, the burning deserts, the unexpected and blessedly refreshing lakes, even the heat. Her two boys rode their own ponies. She had real servants, not bodyguards. And Michael lived a more normal life. He owned a construction business. He joined the businessmen's clubs and civic committees. He had a healthy interest in local politics without interfering publicly. It was a good life. Kay was happy that they were closing down their New York house and that Las Vegas would be truly their permanent home. She hated coming back to New York. And so, on this last trip, she had arranged all the packing and shipping of goods with the utmost efficiency and speed. And now, on the final day, she felt that same urgency to leave that long-time patients feel when it is time to be discharged from the hospital. On that final day, Kay Adams Corleone woke at dawn. She could hear the roar of the truck motors outside on the mall, the trucks that would empty all the houses of furniture. The Corleone family would be flying back to Las Vegas in the afternoon, including Mama Corleone. When Kay came out of the bathroom, Michael was propped up on his pillow, smoking a cigarette.
Why the hell do you have to go to church every morning? I don't mind Sundays, but why the hell during the week? You're as bad as my mother.
He reached over in the darkness and switched on the table light. Kay sat at the edge of the bed to pull on her stockings.
You know how converted Catholics are. They take it more seriously.
Michael reached over to touch her thigh on the warm skin where the top of her nylon hose ended.
Don't. I'm taking communion this morning.
He didn't try to hold her when she got up from the bed. Smiling slightly, he said,
If you're such a strict Catholic, how come you let the kids duck going to church so much?
She felt uncomfortable, and she was wary. He was studying her with what she thought of privately as his Don's eye.
They have plenty of time. When we get back home, I'll make them attend more.
She kissed him goodbye before she left. Outside the house, the air was already getting warm. The summer sun rising in the east was red. Kay walked to where her car was parked near the gates of the mall. Mama Corleone, dressed in her widow black, was already sitting in it, waiting for her. It had become a set routine, early mass, every morning, together. Kay kissed the old woman's wrinkled cheek, then got behind the wheel. Mama Corleone asked suspiciously,
You eat the breakfast?
No.
The old woman nodded her head approvingly. Kay had once forgotten that it was forbidden to take food from midnight on before receiving Holy Communion. That had been a long time ago, but Mama Corleone never trusted her after that and always checked.
You feel all right?
Yes.
The church was small and desolate in the early morning sunlight. Its stained glass windows shielded the interior from heat. It would be cool there, a place to rest. Kay helped her mother-in-law up the white stone steps and then let her go before her. The old woman preferred a pew up front, close to the altar. Kay waited on the steps for an extra minute. She was always reluctant at this last moment, always a little fearful. Finally, she entered the cool darkness. She took the holy water on her fingertips and made the sign of the cross, fleetingly touched her wet fingertips to her parched lips. Candles flickered redly before the saints, the Christ on his cross. Kay genuflected before entering her row, and then knelt on the hard wooden rail of the pew to wait for her call to communion. She bowed her head as if she were praying, but she was not quite ready for that. It was only here in these dim, vaulted churches that she allowed herself to think about her husband's other life, about that terrible night a year ago when he had deliberately used all their trust and love in each other to make her believe his lie that he had not killed his sister's husband. She had left him because of that lie, not because of the deed. The next morning, she had taken the children away with her to her parents' house in New Hampshire, without a word to anyone, without really knowing what action she meant to take. Michael had immediately understood. He had called her the first day, and then left her alone. It was a week before the limousine from New York pulled up in front of her house with Tom Hagen. She had spent a long, terrible afternoon with Tom Hagen, the most terrible afternoon of her life. They had gone for a walk in the woods outside her little town, and Hagen had not been gentle. Kay had made the mistake of trying to be cruelly flippant, a role to which she was not suited.
Did Mike send you up here to threaten me? I expected to see some of the boys get out of the car with their machine guns to make me go back.
For the first time since she had known him, she saw Hagen angry.
That's the worst kind of juvenile crap I've ever heard. I never expected that from a woman like you. Come on, Kay.
All right.
They walked along the green country road. Hagen asked quietly,
"Why did you run away?"
Because Michael lied to me. Because he made a fool of me when he stood godfather to Connie's boy. He betrayed me. I can't love a man like that. I can't live with it. I can't let him be father to my children.
I don't know what you're talking about.
She turned on him with now justified rage.
I mean that he killed his sister's husband. Do you understand that?
She paused for a moment.
And he lied to me.
They walked on for a long time in silence. Finally, Hagen said,
"You have no way of really knowing that's all true. But just for the sake of argument, let's assume that it's true. I'm not saying it is, remember. But what if I gave you what might be some justification for what he did? Or rather, some possible justifications."
Kay looked at him scornfully.
That's the first time I've seen the lawyer side of you, Tom. It's not your best side.
Hagen grinned.
Okay, just hear me out. What if Carlo had put Sonny on the spot, fingered him? What if Carlo beating up Connie that time was a deliberate plot to get Sonny out in the open, that they knew he would take the route over the Jones Beach Causeway? What if Carlo had been paid to help get Sonny killed? Then what?
Kay didn't answer. Hagen went on.
And what if the Don, a great man, couldn't bring himself to do what he had to do, avenge his son's death by killing his daughter's husband? What if that, finally, was too much for him, and he made Michael his successor, knowing that Michael would take that load off his shoulders, would take that guilt?
It was all over with,
Kay said, tears springing into her eyes.
Everybody was happy. Why couldn't Carlo be forgiven? Why couldn't everything go on and everybody forget?
She had led him across a meadow to a tree-shaded brook. Hagen sank down on the grass and sighed. He looked around, sighed again.
In this world, you could do it.
He's not the man I married.
Hagen laughed shortly.
If he were, he'd be dead now. You'd be a widow now. You'd have no problem.
What the hell does that mean? Come on, Tom, speak out straight once in your life. I know Michael can't, but you're not Sicilian. You can tell a woman the truth. You can treat her like an equal, a fellow human being.
There was another long silence. Hagen shook his head.
You've got Mike wrong. You're mad because he lied to you. Well, he warned you never to ask him about business. You're mad because he was godfather to Carlo's boy, but you made him do that. Actually, it was the right move for him to make if he was going to take action against Carlo. The classical, tactical move to win the victim's trust.
Hagen gave her a grim smile.
Is that straight enough talk for you?
But Kay had bowed her head. Hagen went on.
I'll give you some more straight talk. After the Don died, Mike was set up to be killed. Do you know who set him up? Tessio. So Tessio had to be killed. Carlo had to be killed, because treachery can't be forgiven. Michael could have forgiven it, but people never forgive themselves, and so they would always be dangerous. Michael really liked Tessio. He loves his sister. But he would be shirking his duty to you and his children, to his whole family, to me and my family, if he let Tessio and Carlo go free. They would have been a danger to us all our lives.
Kay had been listening to this with tears running down her face.
Is that what Michael sent you up here to tell me?
Hagen looked at her in genuine surprise.
No. He told me to tell you you could have everything you want and do everything you want, as long as you take good care of the kids.
Hagen smiled.
He said to tell you that you're his Don. That's just a joke.
Kay put her hand on Hagen's arm.
He didn't order you to tell me all the other things?
Hagen hesitated a moment, as if debating whether to tell her a final truth.
You still don't understand. If you told Michael what I've told you today, I'm a dead man.
He paused again.
You and the children are the only people on this earth he couldn't harm.
It was a long 5 minutes after that Kay rose from the grass and they started walking back to the house. When they were almost there, Kay said to Hagen,
After supper, can you drive me and the kids to New York in your car?
That's what I came for.
A week after she returned to Michael, she went to a priest for instruction to become a Catholic. From the innermost recess of the church, the bell tolled for repentance. As she had been taught to do, Kay struck her breast lightly with her clenched hand, the stroke of repentance. The bell tolled again, and there was the shuffling of feet as the communicants left their seats to go to the altar rail. Kay rose to join them. She knelt at the altar, and from the depths of the church, the bell tolled again. With her closed hand, she struck her heart once more. The priest was before her. She tilted back her head and opened her mouth to receive the papery thin wafer. This was the most terrible moment of all, until it melted away, and she could swallow, and she could do what she came to do. Washed clean of sin, a favored supplicant, she bowed her head and folded her hands over the altar rail. She shifted her body to make her weight less punishing to her knees. She emptied her mind of all thought of herself, of her children, of all anger, of all rebellion, of all questions. Then, with a profound and deeply willed desire to believe, to be heard, as she had done every day since the murder of Carlo Rizzi, she said the necessary prayers for the soul of Michael Corleone.
We hope you have enjoyed our presentation of The Godfather by Mario Puzo.